persisting innovation, achieving aspiration.
rising sun means different things to different people. For the 2,500-strong workforce at Advic, it's an opportunity to have a fresh perspective, to perform better than yesterday and touch new horizons. Advic, a $100 million company, caters to every two-wheeler OEM in the world and is the largest manufacturer of oil pumps, chain tensioners and CBS brake systems, in addition to water pump, throttle body assembly, solenoid valves and other products. Advic products are now part of leading two-wheeler, three-wheeler, passenger vehicles and commercial vehicles. Advic, with its 18 locations worldwide in 10 countries, including 7 manufacturing plants in India and 1 each in Indonesia and Vietnam, is always close to its customers. When passion meets innovation, technology transcends imagination. Passion and innovation are in Advic's DNA. Advic, passionately innovative.
Today, Talpros is proud of its rich and successful history of over 5 decades. Their experience and commitment to quality has earned them the global customer trust. Talpros believes in achieving excellence through performance, persistence, and sustenance. The company is backed by a professional team of engineers and technocrats. What makes the company unique is the level of synergy which connects and streamlines all the processes right from the raw material stage to the finished product. Today, the Talpros brand is synonymous with cutting-edge technology products like gaskets, heat shields, forgings, chassis systems, steering and suspension components, rubber molded components and rubber hoses.
and the Americas. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor and pleasure for me to be welcoming you to the third day of the ACMA Auto Technology Partnership Summit and Expo being organized virtually. As you all know, we are celebrating each day of the event in honor of the automotive industry or of the automotive industry of a country or a region that has helped shape the automotive industry in India. While 2 days ago, we inaugurated the event and celebrated the Japan-India Partnership Day. The second day of the event, which is yesterday, we celebrated the European Union-India Partnership Day. And today, we are very glad to celebrate the North America-India Partnership Day. So in today's context, I have great pleasure in recognizing the presence of the Indian ambassador to the US, Ambassador Taranjeet Singh Sandhu, as also my friend, Mr. Bill Long, who is the Chief Executive and the President of MEMA, the US Automotive Association. And today, being the North America-India Partnership Day, as I said, I express my gratitude in particular to MEMA, the Motor Equipment Manufacturers Association of USA, and to APMA, the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association of Canada, for partnering with us for this event. Ladies and gentlemen, as you all know, the automotive industry in India has a turnover of US $50 billion, and we export more than 25% of our produce. The industry provides employment to over 5 million people and is thus a key mobilizer of the Indian economy. And in the pandemic, the industry has stood the test of time, and today we are witnessing a V-shaped recovery. It is with this objective of harnessing the Indian opportunity through partnership, I welcome you all and invite you to join hands with us in creating a robust and sustainable automotive value chain. As part of the event, we are also organizing an expo with 45 of our members displaying their state-of-the-art products and technology. So I request you all to please visit the conference, to visit the expo after the conference. With these few words, having set the context, I now have the pleasure of inviting Mr. Ujjwal Munjal, who is the co-chairperson of the ACMA Pillar on Strategic Partnerships, to formally welcome you all. A quick introduction. Ujjwal is the Managing Director of Rockman Industries and of Hero Electronics, and he's one of our promising young leaders. Ujjwal, may I now invite you to formally welcome everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinny. His Excellency, Mr. Taranjeet Singh Sandhu, Ambassador of India to the United States, Mr. Bill Long, President and CEO, Motor and Equipment Manufacturers Association, Dr. Lakshmi Venu, Lead ATP SE Core Committee, ACMA, and Joint Managing Director, Sundaram Clayton, Mr. Vinny Mehta, Director General, ACMA. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you in the United States and Canada, and a good evening to you here in India. It's a great privilege for me to extend a warm welcome to you to the first ever virtual Auto Technology Partnership Summit and Expo, supported by our partners MEMA, APMA, and AASA from the United States and Canada, as also by our counterpart associations from the rest of the world like Japan, Brazil, and Europe, SIAM, as well as the IPO Forum here in India. At the outset, I would like to place on record our sincere appreciation for His Excellency Mr. Taranjeet Singh Sandhu, Ambassador of India to the United States, and his entire team at the embassy for their support. I'm thankful to MEMA, APMA, AASA, with whom ACMA has been working for the last couple of decades to promote partnership and collaboration between the Indian and the United States auto component industry. Let me take this opportunity to update you a part of what Vinny has already done on the state of the automotive industry. The automotive industry in India has registered a revenue of $50 billion, out of which $14.5 billion is exported out of here. These figures are for the financial year 2019-20, registering a CAGR of 8% over the last 6 years. In the backdrop of the pandemic and the lockdown, the automotive industry faced unprecedented disruptions in the first half of the fiscal year. The industry, through agility, flexibility, and financial discipline, has displayed remarkable resilience and has come back strongly with the unlocking of the economy. Today, we are witnessing a V-shaped recovery and are confident that the growth of the Indian automotive market will sustain. I'm happy to mention that our government here has been very supportive to the cause of the Indian automotive industry. India's Union Cabinet has recently approved the production-linked incentive scheme for 10 sectors, out of which auto and auto component industry plays a prime focus, and will be extended a $7.85 billion worth of incentive over the period of 5 years. This PLI scheme aims at enabling the Indian automotive industry to become globally competitive, attract investment, and create economies of scale, thereby enhancing our export and making us an integral part of the global supply chain. It is in fact in this direction and realizing our Honorable Prime Minister's dream of Atmanirbhar Bharat, or self-reliant India. Today, we are here with the objective of promoting matchmaking between Indian auto component industries and our counterparts from the United States and Canada. I extend a warm and cordial invitation to all our friends to partner and collaborate with our Tier 1 and Tier 2 suppliers and become a part of India's growth story. Today, we have leading 45 quality Indian auto component manufacturers displaying their capabilities and products. As the government of India strengthens its EV emission and safety regulation and connectivity in vehicles gains control, IT and electronic content will become sizable in vehicles. With India's well-established strength in software and embedded systems, co-developing and manufacturing auto electronics is yet another significant opportunity for India-US cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, India offers bright prospects of sevenfold growth in the auto component industry coming up in the next few years. We invite you to partner with the auto component industry for mutual benefit. Please do not hesitate to contact ACMA should you need any assistance or need any information regarding the Indian auto and auto component industry. Thank you very much. Over to you, Vinny.
Thank you, Ujjwal, for very comprehensively talking to us about the opportunities in the Indian automotive space, as also setting the context of the event today. Ladies and gentlemen, I move on to our next speaker. I have esteemed pleasure in inviting a very dear friend, Mr. Bill Long, President and CEO of the Motor and Equipment Manufacturers Association, MEMA, of the USA. Bill has over 4 decades of very rich experience in the automotive industry. He joined MEMA in he became the president of MEMA in 2019, and prior to that, he served as the president and chief operating officer of AASA, the Light Vehicle Aftermarket Division, as also the executive vice president of MEMA. He has great expertise in government affairs. Bill, may I now invite you for your address, please?
Thank you, Vinny, for that warm introduction. And may I have the presentation, please? Thank you. And thank you again to all of ACMA for the honor to speak with you today. It was a year ago that actually we were all together, and I'm saddened that we aren't able to be together in person today. But I offer my thoughts and my prayers to those that we have lost due to the pandemic. And I wish all of you remain safe and healthy. Next slide, please. As you may know, MEMA is the Motor and Equipment Manufacturers Association, celebrating our 117th anniversary this year, solely representing over 1,000 vehicle parts manufacturers through 4 market-specific divisions: AASA, the Automotive Aftermarket Suppliers Association; OESA, the Original Equipment Suppliers Association; HDMA, Heavy Duty Manufacturers Association, and MIRA, the Association for Sustainable Manufacturing. Next slide, please. In the US, vehicle suppliers have been deemed essential during the pandemic, recognized for their vital role that they play in the automotive ecosystem. And with no surprise, vehicle suppliers are innovators. We conceive, design, and manufacture original equipment systems and technologies that make up 2/3 of the value of every new vehicle in the United States. We supply the aftermarket with automotive and commercial vehicle parts that keep millions of vehicles on the road. And here in India and around the world, motor vehicle parts manufacturers create jobs. And we do all of our work with a focus on public safety and the environment. Next slide, please. In the US, parts manufacturers represent the largest sector of direct manufacturing jobs with over 900,000 total employed and a total employment impact of 4.8 million jobs, contributing an impressive 2.5% to the US economy in GDP. Next slide, please. Briefly, let me share an executive summary of the US market. As you have seen, the pandemic dragged down North American light vehicle output by 20.4% in 2020. Demand, however, has surged in the fourth quarter of last year, up approximately 10%. And currently, OEMs and suppliers are struggling with the global shortage of automotive semiconductors, dampening the recovery. In the light vehicle aftermarket space, demand remained robust, and there is optimism that that will continue into 2021. Similarly, there is equal optimism in the heavy-duty truck and trailer space, with freight expected to see continued growth over this year. Yet, we are seeing challenges in demand volatility and forecast accuracy, as well as labor availability. Next slide, please. Today, however, we recognize and celebrate the North American and India partnership we enjoy and have enjoyed for so long. Looking at 2019 import and export figures, the US imported roughly $1.9 billion US dollars of automotive parts from India. Additionally, the US exported some 540 million. The transformational shift that we see in vehicle technology possesses the present to continue the partnership and opportunities for mutual growth that we've enjoyed. Next slide, please. These opportunities are captured in our vision for a safer, environmentally cleaner, and growing automotive industry, helping to improve lives by enabling greater mobility. Clearly, we're in a period of rapid change. Yet with change comes opportunity for improved profits, which lead to increased investment and growth. Next slide, please. As we pursue these opportunities, we see some headwinds in the industry. The uncertainty related to the global pandemic impacting the global supply chain. US regulations and the cost and the speed of adoption of new technologies. The infrastructure to support new technologies like EVs, electric vehicles, and autonomous vehicles, and a ready, available, and trained workforce. Next slide, please. We know there will be challenges. Vehicle suppliers in the US are among the most regulated. And regarding the new administration's agenda, we will face everything from COVID legislation to transportation reauthorization. We will see a push for greater electrification of vehicles, and we will push for data access. We also know President Biden will alter the conversation on climate change and minimum wage. But here is MEMA's overall message in Washington. Suppliers are the largest employer of manufacturing jobs in the United States, with over 900,000 direct jobs in all 50 states. And that number of supplier jobs actually grew between 2015 and 2019. But in order for the industry to continue to prosper and provide jobs, policymakers must recognize that we operate in a global economy, and we must focus on what is necessary to make the U.S. industry competitive. Protecting a strong global industry does not mean that we turn our backs on U.S. jobs and opportunities. Rather, we must embrace the role that a strong global industry has in building a vibrant U.S. economy and workforce, particularly and especially with the relationship that we enjoy with India and our friends at ACMA. Next slide, please. So Vinny and ACMA, thank you so much for the honor to share a perspective about our relationship and the wonderful friendship that we enjoy and the business opportunities in the future. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the summit.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill, for giving us a very comprehensive perspective of the dynamics of the U.S. automotive industry. Many congratulations on an optimistic rise in the U.S. market in the automotive sector. And of course, the headwinds are pretty similar in India. And of course, we will share more notes as we go along. Thank you once again for joining us. Have a good day. Ladies and gentlemen, I now have the pleasure to invite our chief guest of the occasion, His Excellency Ambassador Taranjeet Singh Sandhu, Ambassador of India to the US. Mr. Sandhu was appointed the Ambassador of India to the US in February 2020. In his very distinguished career spanning over 3 decades in the Indian Foreign Services, Ambassador Sandhu has many eminent positions right from the Soviet Union, and he also has the credit of opening the Indian embassy in Ukraine. Ambassador Sandhu has also been the Consul General of India to Frankfurt. He also has been at the permanent mission of India to the United Nations in New York. Ambassador Sandhu, the floor is yours, and may I request you to kindly address us. Ambassador Sandhu, please.
Thank you. The leadership of ACMA and SIAM, Mr. Bill Long, President and CEO of MEMA, Ujjwal Munjal, friends from India and the United States. Congratulations to ACMA and SIAM on organizing the first ever virtual auto technology partnership summit and expo. It is nice that despite the pandemic, these expos are happening and good to connect through virtual platforms. I am familiar with ACMA and SIAM from my Sri Lanka days and recall meeting some of your members there as well. You are among the most active industry associations in India. I'm happy to see that you have been successful in establishing your presence across North America, especially in the United States. It's a new beginning of a new year, a new decade. There is a new administration in the United States led by President Biden and Vice President Harris. As you may be aware, Prime Minister of India spoke to President-elect on 17th November, wherein he outlined our priority areas for partnering the new administration. These fall broadly under 5 main baskets: healthcare, education, climate change, digital and IT, in addition to the strategic areas, of course. Friends, the auto components industry can play an important role in each of these baskets, promoting clean technologies, tech and R&D collaborations, moving ahead on digital and AI, knowledge partnerships, use of biosensors in vehicles for passive health monitoring, etc., etc. There is so much that can be done together. Thanks to the reforms initiated by the Government of India and your spirit of entrepreneurship, India today is the fourth largest automotive market in the world. India is also the largest tractor, two-wheeler and three-wheeler manufacturers, second largest bus manufacturer, third largest heavy trucks manufacturer, and fourth largest car manufacturer in the world. Of course, there is potential to do much more. The US market will be critical in this regard. Currently, India accounts only over just 2% of the total auto part imports into the United States. As the US looks to shift towards secure and reliable supply chains, Indian industry has huge opportunity at hand. You need to identify those specific components in which Indian industry has a competitive edge and make focused and persistent efforts. As we expand our exports, it is equally important to invest in global collaborations. Here again, the United States is critical as the second largest manufacturer of automobiles and a leader in emerging technologies. 100% FDI is now allowed in India in this sector. India offers efficiencies both in terms of cost and quality of human resources. This is the time for US companies to invest in India, given the importance of securing reliable supply chains. Friends, as we focus on the present, we must also have an eye on future. The future of the industry will be electric vehicles, given that they offer clean and green solutions to containing carbon emissions and mitigating climate change. It is projected that 58% of global passenger vehicles sales in 2040 will come from electric vehicles. Currently, EVs make up only 3% of global car sales. In recent weeks, prominent US companies have announced their plans to go completely electric by 2035, a clear indicator of where the industry is heading. The US is also targeting a net zero emissions economy by 2050. India has been ahead of the curve to capitalize on the opportunity presented by the EVs. Back in 2015, government launched the FAME scheme, that is faster adoption and manufacturing of hybrid and electric vehicles. The response has been good. We need to create a complete and reliable ecosystem if electric mobility were to be a reality for all. India and the United States can collaborate in various fields such as battery technology, charging station infrastructure, standards, specifications, and best practices, and workforce training programs. All stakeholders, auto and electronic manufacturers, transportation companies, researchers, state and federal governments must work together to realize this opportunity. We at the embassy would be happy to facilitate in whatever way we can. Once again, I congratulate the organizers for all your efforts. I wish you the very best. Let the wheels move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador. It's really interesting to listen to your very incisive perspective on the opportunities that exist to create a win-win situation between India and the US. You spoke to us about clean technology, about R&D, about digital, about AI, about biosensors. These are indeed areas for us to work and harness. And as you said, that the Indian industry is also evaluating, the government of India has come up with a FAME scheme to usher in a new revolution on electric mobility. We will hear about all these in our forthcoming sessions, but thank you very much for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, I now have the pleasure of inviting Dr. Lakshmi Venu. the Joint Managing Director of Sundaram Clayton, to propose a vote of thanks in the inaugural session. Lakshmi is one of our promising young leaders, and she has contributed very immensely in conceptualizing this 3-day event. Lakshmi, may I invite you to propose a vote of thanks to the ambassador and to Mr. Bill Long.
Thank you, Vinny. His Excellency Mr. Taranjeet Singh Sandhu, Ambassador of India to the United States, Mr. Bill Long, President and CEO, MEMA, Mr. Ujjwal Munjal, Co-Chairman, Pillar 4, ACMA, Mr. Vinny Mehta, Director General, ACMA, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning to all of you in the United States and Canada, and a good evening to everyone here in India. I am indeed delighted to extend a vote of thanks to all our dignitaries and our participants who have joined us for the ACMA Virtual Auto Technology Partnership Summit and Expo. The unique thing about this event is that we have been able to leverage technology effectively to bring the entire global automotive industry together onto a single platform and create high-quality engagement despite the restrictions of these times. His Excellency Mr. Sandhu, we are indeed very grateful that you have taken the time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. We are very appreciative of the guidance and support extended to us by the Indian Embassy in the US and in particular by yourself. I'd like to assure you that we at ACMA are committed to enabling electric mobility to scale faster in India and look forward to partnering with companies in the United States to realize this opportunity. On behalf of ACMA, I'd like to thank Mr. Bill Long, President and CEO of the Motor and Equipment Manufacturers Association, for being here today and for MEMA's unstinted support and guidance to ACMA in executing this event. Lastly, as I close, we are delighted to have our international participants here with us. ACMA believes in creating strong economic value through partnerships, and we hope that today's interactions will bring many meaningful collaborations between the Indian and North American companies present here. Thank you, and over back to you, Vinny.
Thank you, Lakshmi. We now move on to our next session on the panel discussion. Panel discussion on globalization through strategic partnerships and investments. Lakshmi, are you there to do the welcome for Mr. Wilfred Auburn, the senior partner at Roland Berger?
Yes, my pleasure.
Would you welcome him?
Yes. I now have the pleasure to invite Dr. Wilfred Auburn, the senior partner of Roland Berger, to moderate the upcoming panel session. Dr. Auburn is responsible for the firm's global commercial vehicle, construction, and agricultural businesses, and he leads the US aerospace and defense practice. Previously, he was the managing partner of Roland Berger in India, a practice that he continues to support in the automotive and industrial space. Dr. Auburn's work includes growth strategies, M&A, due diligence, operational performance improvements, and technology strategies. He has served on numerous industry associations and panels, is a regular speaker at key industry events, and publishes extensively. Prior to his work with Roland Berger, Dr. Auburn was the managing director and CEO of Mercedes-Benz India and responsible for the passenger car, truck, and bus businesses. He held several positions with Daimler across Europe, the United States, and India before that. Welcome, Dr. Auburn.
Lakshmi, thank you very much. His Excellency, Mr. Taranjeet Singh Sandhu, Mr. Long, Mr. Munjal, Lakshmi, Vinny, it's always a pleasure to be here with friends from ACMA and SIAM. It's great to have an opportunity to talk with an excellent panel about the opportunity that India brings. My own India experience goes back more than 25 years, started out in 1994 in Chennai, and then in 2000, I had the first opportunity to work in India. We built up the R&D center for Mercedes-Benz, a center that today boasts more than 10,000 engineers. I came back in 2005, ran the operations of Mercedes-Benz in Pune, which was a very profitable business, and business that gave us an opportunity to reinvest in the country and build a factory that today is the global hub for CKD operations for Mercedes-Benz. We also had an opportunity to drive the introduction of Bharat-Benz, a new brand, a value brand in trucks and buses that had three purposes. Number one, compete in the Indian market. We needed a different product than just the Mercedes-Benz high-end applications. Number two was to use India as a global export hub for value products and get those products into Southeast Asia, get them into Africa, South America, but also into the US and into Europe, right? And number three was to work with Indian suppliers to ensure that we can leverage their capabilities for our global operations. All three in sort of targets were successfully achieved. And I think this was something that really repositioned the country in the overall strategic roadmap of Daimler. Moving then into consulting some 10 years ago, I had an opportunity to see how other MNCs are very, very capable, very successful in leveraging India. Companies such as John Deere, CNH, Suzuki, Hyundai, but also companies that are represented today in our panel. In addition to those companies, I was impressed by the success of Indian companies, companies that combined Western processes and quality, Japanese processes and quality with Indian ingenuity that leveraged the advantages that India brings, the fact that it is a lead market in two-wheelers, in three-wheelers, in small cars, in small tractors, to build a profitable business, not only in India, but also to use India very successfully for building a global brand and a global, highly successful export business. India as a business environment obviously can be challenging. We do still have some work to do as far as logistics and some other factors are concerned. And you need to continuously focus on being agile and innovative, but at the same time process and cost efficient. So it's a little bit a conundrum. How do you combine the left and the right side of your brain? Yet I'm very convinced that given all the positive examples that we have on the table, given the opportunity to master the tremendous industry transition challenge that new powertrains, autonomous technology, and other technologies bring to the industry, to master that via partnership, I am very much convinced that India remains an opportunity for companies to partner, to invest, and to grow. And I'm really happy to have a great panel with me today that can give their perspectives on the opportunities that the country holds. I'm very happy to have with me, and I apologize in the interest of time. I'll just do a very quick introduction so that we have more time for Q&As. But I'm very happy to have with me Mr. Kaushik Bhupendra. He's the Associate Director, Procurement and Head of Global Sourcing, Navistar. Mr. KV Praveen, the Director of Purchasing, BCC India and Australia for Meritor. Mr. Kartik Selvan, the Head of India Purchasing and IPO for Dana. Mr. Paul McCarthy, the President and COO of the Automotive Aftermarket Suppliers Association. Mr. Colin Singh Dillon, the Chief Technical Officer of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association from Canada. And Mr. Guru Prasad Mutlapur, the Managing Director of Bosch Automotive Electronics from Bangalore. With this short introduction, I would request Kaushik to come and present his thoughts.
And again, thank you for inviting me for this ACMA presentation. It's always a great time to be along with the folks from ACMA. I have been associated for the last couple of years, and it's always exciting to learn more as well as present opportunities that come across from North America. So today I'll be talking about OEM perspective and opportunities. So this is how I would say it from an OEM perspective from North America. So coming from the truck industry, I work at Navistar. So if you look at it from a production versus service versus aftermarket, the three basic things that suppliers need to focus. So what I see from India primarily is there's a very good focus on the production parts. You name it, like castings, forgings, hoses. I think people do a great job there. But I think to get to the next level in terms of value add proposition and getting to more of a supplier owned design, I think there's still great opportunity that the suppliers can still look after, vouch for, and also partner with companies in North America. Now, what is also making this more compelling in partnerships is the USMCA. As many of you might be aware, the USMCA Act basically requires roughly about 75% North America content or USMCA content. Now, a lot of the companies are taking this really ahead of time. Like Navistar, we've already started that a couple of years ago, starting to plan for 2025, 2027. So it is really key that the suppliers also are looking at global partnerships, not only for North America suppliers investing in India, but also Indian suppliers collaborating in North America for future growth opportunities. Now, there are two other areas when it comes to supplier collaborations as well as export from India to US. Now, aftermarket has a couple of different things to it. One is you have the OE service part, and you also have private label brands. Just to put some perspective to it. So when I say private label brands in North America, there's a huge market. Just in the truck industry, the aftermarket market size is $30 billion. So out of which the OEMs probably capture about 40 to 50%, and the remaining 50% is out there open where you have several players competing. So in that segment, India can do a lot more. There's tons of opportunities where a lot of the reverse engineering needs to happen, as well as looking at second owners, third owners of the truck. You know, people are looking for parts when the product life cycle goes beyond production. So 30 billion is huge. I think there's great opportunity if suppliers can focus on products that's in here with good market intelligence. That'll be a great way to move forward. That's about the production and aftermarket. But also a little more perspective I would like to give is on the quality perspective. You know, I think the companies in India have come a long way in getting to a level where people do understand that the quality is really good. Now, what happens is quality becomes table stakes these days. You know, meeting requirements is again a table stake. What can you do beyond it? You know, with the Industry 4.0, these are all cues that the suppliers need to start investing in technology, investing in resources that will build a long-term future for suppliers to put their growth path, not only from a perspective of growing their business, but I think with quality comes more business. I think that's a key initiative that every supplier, I would recommend to do that. Thirdly, I would like to talk about is electric vehicles. Recently, I started leading the procurement function for electric vehicles at Navistar. Now, one of the good things, or I would say the pros and cons of EVs is it's fast to market. You really don't have time. By the time you want to launch, your lead times run out. So this is in its infancy. There's a lot of startups coming in, not only in the US, but also other regions. What I do see is, you know, China has a head start here in the EV segment. And I think India has a lot of potential. I think I do see a lot of collaborations and joint ventures. I think if that's something that the suppliers can invest and grow, I think the opportunities can just be a lot more, and it can just make sure that companies in the US start investing in those startups for a good collaborative approach moving forward. I think this is some of my perspectives. Back to you, Wilfred. Thank you.
Really demonstrates the need for investment by suppliers to be up and running and state of the art. With that, I'd like to call on Praveen. Praveen, you want to give us your perspective?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much, Wilfred. And thanks, ACMA, for this wonderful event, the North America and India Partnership Summit. Praveen, I am the Director for Purchasing, Meritor, been in Meritor for quite a long time, close to 15 years now. And also have been associated with ACMA, many of their initiatives. Uh, I hope I have my perspective through a couple of slides. I hope my page is on the screen. Just to talk about Meritor's presence, Meritor is basically a US mobility company, automotive sector, been one of the probably 100 years old. And we have our presence in India in addition to the various global friends. In India, we have been here for more than 5 years to joint venture flag. And we have been serving many OEs in India through this year. There has been, over the last 15 years, there has been significant investments that have been made in India to meet the customer and customer demands and also bring some global products, especially customers like Daimler and things like that. So it has been a wonderful journey in terms of our operations here. In addition to that, we also opened our global tech center and also sourcing unit almost 2 decades back. And there has been a very, very successful journey. I just would like to highlight some of the key factors that made us be more successful in this journey so far. Starting with, I would say, strategic partnership, really positive. I would say ever since we began our journey here, through this time, we have seen very positive alliances with the suppliers here. And at the same time, I also see a extremely dedicated corporate willing to work with the Indian suppliers and been associated with them for a long period. So a strategic partnership in our mind is also that we have been looking for on a moderate to long-term focus in terms of developing them, not to get wide range of supply base into that, but extremely focused on developing and strengthening the relationship with the identity supply base in India. And all our investments in terms of resources deployed in developing those suppliers is aimed at developing a extremely positive relationship. And that has actually helped us in ensuring that the metrics that normally talk quality, delivery, and cost performances to be in line with our expectations. Which has been also, we've been able to get that to the suppliers in India. The one thing that I would like to also mention here is many of the supply base, because of probably our longevity of being here, we have been able to ensure that the supplier invests both in terms of managing their capacities and also in terms of newer technologies, especially in the area of castings and skin components. It has been a very wonderful. Through these years, I can confidently tell you that it has been, we started off with probably a secondary layered force. Now being some of the suppliers here are being the integral part of it. That really speaks of what positive experience that we have been able to have with Indian auto friends. Can I move to the next page? So I just wanted to talk about what opportunities we have and then what challenges that also have us. One is that, I have also been associated as a global sourcing head of China till the pandemic started. Been there for nearly 6-7 years managing the China global sourcing. With the China and US trade barriers, we feel that there are many opportunities. We are already seeing many opportunities coming in to the Indian auto sector. And of course, there are other Asian countries as well, like Vietnam, Indonesia. And I see India has a great potential in looking at how we can really take the advantage of China current ongoing trade. But in addition to that, we also see that there could be opportunities as we move forward for some exports out of India to China. This might sound very optimistic, but we have been successfully able to do that as well. Now, in addition to that, speaking about untapped opportunities within Meritor, we have a business industrial. We have been growing on that sector. We have heavily focused on our truck market, the truck components from India. There are very high opportunities to the industrial sector, be it on a specialty vehicle like trains and some of the refuse trucks and things like that. So we have good opportunity that we really focus on industrial. These are all going to be not very high volumes like we see it in truck, but definitely there are opportunities. And as we have been hearing over the last 30 minutes, there has been immense potential on the e-mobility. Meritor has also partnered a company called Transpower, with whom we are working closely on developing new products into the market on the electrification. And since it is an emerging one, now that we have a lot of opportunity that Indian companies can work, but not only limited to metallic, but also some of the other integrated modules in electrical and electronics are a future opportunity that we can think in the e-mobility. Kaushik rightly touched upon the aftermarket. It's still here in India in terms of reverse engineering. Those things has been a challenge, but that's a greater opportunity given that markets and other and our share India has been extremely limited. So I see that there is more and more opportunity that we see in that. The last one in terms of opportunity from Meritor side, it is also in the we have a very good potential in developing some of the killer components here. These are all some opportunities I thought to highlight. We move forward. At this time, I would quickly touch upon some challenges that we face. Again, Kaushik practice on our engineering capability, both in terms of product development, so in process innovation and process engineering. We still need a significant improvement in those areas. We need to move away from print to, in terms of adding more value into the product, adapting to the newer technologies is a requirement. It seems to be a challenge. I know that ACMA has been heavily engaged in these recent past with some of the challenges that are faced on supply chain and advanced planning is required from Indian supply chain, improving more effectiveness, more efficiencies in making them to be more competent. Local presence in the US will certainly help in kind of making sure that the certain communications gaps are developed in a local. This is one thing that we always see. It's not with bigger organizations, especially when it comes to the smaller companies. So we need to. Last on this focus is definitely on value chain, establishing and developing a very robust value chain suppliers is very key. And then I would also say that sometimes we do struggle on program management, especially on effective communication. These are all the certain things if it is really done would be very good for the reach the goal of $45 billion. What we need kind of. Last, being the chairman of the IPO Forum International Purchasing Office, we have a forum that we meet at least 3 or 4 times a year. Now on virtual platform, 40 very active IPOs who are significantly contributing to the Indian auto segment, to reach the with that, I would conclude.
Especially a couple of points we'll go around and discuss later. For example, the opportunity that the current situation in China offers to India. But right now, I would like to move on and would like to ask Karthik to share his views in terms of leveraging partnership to expand markets. Karthik, the floor is yours.
And the International Purchasing Organization. And for those that might be hearing of Dana for the first time, we pride ourselves in being a 117-year-old, approximately $8.6 billion publicly listed company on the New York Stock Exchange. So we are a global technology leader in terms of efficient power conveyance and energy management solutions. So in terms of talking about strategic partnerships and investments, I was thinking of a relevant topic. And then, what better topic than Dana's own journey in electrification? So partnerships and investments happen to be the very core of our journey here, which I will share over the next few minutes. Of course, and where we go from here onwards. So if I could have the slide, please, the one with the timeline. Okay. So basically, since I think many people might not be able to see the details on the slide, it basically encapsulates the different acquisitions, partnerships, investments that we have done over the last 2.5 and 3 years, right? So I won't touch on each of it in the interest of time, but I will just touch on some of the key ones. Our serious foray in EV started with the acquisition of TM4, the subsidiary of the Canadian company Hydro-Quebec, to form a JV called Dana TM4, with Dana having 55% of the stake. And this acquisition gave us the access to high and medium voltage motors and also inverters and battery charging technologies. And soon after that, we augmented our product portfolio through the acquisitions of SME in Italy and Ashwood in the UK through our Oerlikon acquisition in 2019. And this gave us access to an entire range of low voltage AC and DC motors. But also in parallel, we asked ourselves, how we would be distinguishing ourselves and not get trapped in a Me Too strategy. And we saw value in potentially being able to offer customers an integrated EV solution. So that led us to invest in another Canadian company called Nodresa and Rational Motion in Europe. Both these companies are prominent system integration and application engineering experts. And through this investment, we further enhanced Dana's electrification capabilities, by combining the complete portfolio of motors, inverters, chargers, gearboxes, and thermal management products, with proprietary BMS systems, electric powertrain controls to deliver the complete powertrain system to our customers. So slide change, please. So if you see on this is really the product in pictures and shows our range of product offerings all the way from low voltage to high voltage motors. And when there is a motor and a battery, then there is a cooling system, which becomes important. And as many might be aware, Dana is very active in the area of providing thermal management solutions as well through our business segment called as Power Technologies. Okay, next slide, please. So this is the application in pictures, and these are just not pictures. Dana is working closely with customers in each of these spaces in their journey towards electrification. And we do realize that our customers, are at different horizons in their electrification journey, and would like to support them with potential solutions for their architectures. So one thing I want to highlight here is that, yes, pass cars, two-wheelers, buses, trucks will lead the electrification curve and finally trickle down to off-highway, right? But off-highway in itself covers a range of vehicles. And there are several applications that are actually conducive to electric platform, simply because you may not want a diesel engine in those environments, maybe safety related, noise related. And we are actively working with several of those customers on such applications as well. Okay. So very quickly going to the next slide, please. So where do we go from here? So Dana has spent the last 3 years forming about 8 or 9 of these partnerships in different forms. The key thing is going to be now in terms of industrialization. So if you have all of this know-how, but it takes too much time to market, or even worse, don't industrialize, it's no good. So as it stands today, we are able to make traction motors in Canada, but of course in the UK, in Italy, and in China. And then we mulled, where our next footprint would be. And I'm pleased to say that Dana decided to invest in India, in Pune, for its next electrification plant, where we make traction motors and inverters. And this will be in Chakan, in Pune, and should be commissioned in Q1 of this year. Given all the geopolitical rhetorics we see in the world, the fact that India and Southeast Asia themselves represent a big market for EV, the proven ability to show competitive cost advantage, the access to an R&D ecosystem, and obviously the policies that we spoke about sometime earlier, were the significant drivers to deciding that we have a footprint in India. With that said, of course, the question on how we continue to use our capital judiciously will always be there. So, what is considered as core, what is non-core will continue to evolve. And that's where I really see a lot of opportunities happening. So while we will continue to leverage our core commodities, let's say castings, forgings, aluminum, sealing products, we will also expand into new areas such as power electronics, ECUs, softwares, etc. And really, how do we do this? It is by strategic partnerships, aka our suppliers. So this could be organic, this could be inorganic, technology collaborations, or a combination. And I really see a huge potential for those with the agility, and the key term also being flexibility in terms of industrialization and time to market for the EV space. And these two things are the key, the agility and the flexibility. Agility obviously is the window of opportunity, and flexibility because we don't have the critical mass yet. And we always get in the vicious circle of cost and scale. So there have to be strategic initiatives, strategic investments, bearing in mind the future. So I see a huge potential in this space, and I welcome all our suppliers. Yes, the passenger car will go first, but these changes will eventually impact and have a ripple effect across the supply base. So, you will see suppliers that will migrate to EV platforms to support the EV industry, or you will see suppliers going towards other commodities that are not upset by disruption. So either ways, this is going to have a ripple effect, and we should be strategic in our approach. So those were some of my thoughts. Back to you, Dr. Wilfred.
Perfect, Kartik. I think this was very insightful, clearly something that we'll discuss later as far as partnerships are concerned and as far as the EV ecosystem is concerned. With that, I would like to call on Paul. Paul, can you share your points of views from a US perspective?
Slide. I do want to thank our friends at ACMA. It's a pleasure to be with everyone here today, but especially great to see Vinny and our friends at ACMA again, even if only virtually. Next slide. Quickly, who we are and why I am speaking to you. And if you can go to the next slide, which has the large logo. We are the Automotive Aftermarket Suppliers Association. So we represent North American suppliers of the parts, the components, the tools, the chemicals, the technologies that keep light vehicles, so cars and light commercial vehicles, running safely and affordably throughout their life cycle. If you can go to the next slide, we are part of MEMA, which has been representing vehicle suppliers across the spectrum from assembly line to aftermarket, light to heavy duty since 1904. And you heard from our leader, Bill Long, earlier. Now, if you go to the next slide, I am president of AESA and I have over a quarter century of experience in our industry, including valued time in India. Now, next slide, which should show the cover of our landmark study from 2020. The topic of this study was the future production and sourcing footprint of the aftermarket. And it was conducted with our friends at Roland Berger. And this study turned out to be even more timely than we could have imagined, given global trade tensions, in particular, a renewed appreciation coming out of the pandemic for supply chain risks. If you go to the next slide, to give you just kind of a summary of the findings of the study, it was that in our new world, there is not a single answer. It's no longer the simple answer of the last generation, which was to move to China, where it was cheapest. Now it's a very complex story. It depends on product types, labor content, shipping costs, value add and technology levels, supply chain risk tolerance, and on and on. So in sum, we're seeing that footprint issues are adding a degree of complexity and opportunity to our global businesses. If you go to the next slide, we definitely found in the study that supplier considerations on footprint have shifted. When we did this study, when we talked to our members in early 2020, as many as 72% of suppliers had considered in some way modifying that manufacturing footprint. And given how things have developed, that has probably continued. If you can go to the next slide. Of course, we also have this shifting global megatrend, the end of so-called cheap China. So we've seen wage growth in China. We've seen an increasing domestic market to attract local manufacturing. And of course, the US-China tariffs. So given all of this, some big US customers have made clear that given this trade situation, the supply chain disruptions we've seen coming out of COVID-19, and concerns about shipping time and costs, that they are looking to reduce their China footprint. So next slide, which should show the stacked bars. Versus China, the study found that Southeast Asia and India, as well as Mexico, which also has the advantage of nearshoring and trade pact certainty, these countries now have cost advantages for labor-intensive components versus China. Now, I don't want to overstate the case. To be clear, not everything is leaving China. Very much will remain, because Chinese companies in many parts categories in the aftermarket, they have tremendous scale advantages. They have a strong supply chain. And some Chinese players have excellent quality and engineering experience. They are strong global competitors. If you go to the next slide, this gives us an ability to look a little bit about this change over time that we're talking about. So this 4-quadrant chart looks at infrastructure and business stability on the vertical and cost competitiveness on the horizontal. And you can see in 2010 that China was very cost competitive and was also an emerging market leader in infrastructure. India, which is the blue dot, had cost competitiveness, but it was less competitive with China on other metrics. Now, if you move to the next slide, we've seen that currently China has moved from the far right to the left on cost, although it continues to offer other elements that provide sourcing appeal. India, again in blue, has become more attractive on infrastructure and still has a good cost position. But the real takeaway is there is a long list of countries and options. This is not a simple decision process for manufacturers. If you move to the next slide, the impact of these changes varies dramatically by product type. There is no one-size-fits-all solution when looking at location. Again, it varies by freight intensivity, capital intensivity, labor intensivity, and increasingly, supply chain risk tolerance. If you go to the next slide, we, as a result, have seen aftermarket suppliers invest in production locations all over the world. So it's been in various emerging markets, as well as nearshoring and even reshoring trends. So if you go to the next slide, and what does the future hold for US trade, including with India? We have seen that word, reshoring. It remains a buzzword for the new US administration, as it did for the previous. And it really remains to be seen whether be encouraged with carrots or sticks. And in turn, with global trade, we've been seeing an element of economic nationalism, of protectionism in many countries around the world. And again, remains to be seen whether this will be carrots or sticks. So if you go to the next slide of conclusions, what are the opportunities here? So the folks at ACMA asked me to mention contract manufacturing, and that may be possible. I would say that generally we think the trend towards contract manufacturing in the aftermarket is declining. There was a stage where suppliers were manufacturing less and sourcing more. However, with the threat of direct sourcing from large customers, many suppliers are ensuring that they have that manufacturing or at least strong partnership as a core competence. So in addition, some of the customers who are direct sourcing have found that that has become a lot more complicated. As we just described, sourcing decisions are getting harder. So for many products, it's not as simple as simply finding the source in China and buying direct. We've also seen some significant issues when customers attempted to direct source. They ran into significant quality issues. They've run into afoul of tariff rules. There's been a host of concerns. And so we think direct sourcing will get more challenging for retailers going forward. So therefore, I would encourage Indian manufacturers to consider other options, not just contract manufacturing, but also joint ventures, partnering with global suppliers. And another thing that is not appreciated enough, but my colleague from Dana just mentioned, we have seen a huge opportunity and a necessity for competitiveness in other growth markets. It's tier 2 and tier 3 manufacturing. So supplying to the system supplier. Because without a strong tier 2 and tier 3, emerging markets are simply not competitive. We've seen that. It's been a hindrance to resourcing in many countries. So it should be considered by manufacturers as part of your strategy. So in sum, we see a very complex, a multi-country world that the aftermarket is looking at in terms of its future manufacturing footprint. So there is absolutely opportunity, and there is also competition. So if you move to the next slide, I just wanted to say thank you very much and look forward to the discussion, and back to you, Wilfred.
From a US perspective, we'll definitely have a more detailed look at this later. And now I'd like to call on Colin to give his perspective from a Canadian point of view. Colin? Perfect.
Watching and listening. My name is Colin Dillon, and I'm speaking to you from the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association in Canada. If I could have the slides brought up, please. My background is the Chief Technology Officer at the APMA, and so my angle is going to be about technology partnerships and the opportunity for Project Arrow. And for those of you who are not aware, last January at the global G7 meetings that were held in New Delhi, I was very fortunate to present Project Arrow, which is the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association's opportunity to provide a concept vehicle, a zero-emission concept vehicle, which will be showcasing the best of Canadian supply chain in the automotive sector. Next slide, please. For those of you that aren't aware of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, we have been around for over 69 years now. We are a major voice when it comes to global policies and regulations, as well as Canadian policy and regulations. My president, Flavia Volpe, played an integral role in making sure the USMCA NAFTA 2.0 was favorable for the automotive sector. With the investments from the D3 over the past few months into the electrification of some of their vehicles in Canada, just goes to show you how well that negotiations went and how well the new policy is already working. We are also a great place for networking and intelligence when it comes around to not only the vehicle, but also this complete supply chain in the automotive sector in Canada. Next slide, please. So why is a trade association trying to build a concept vehicle in 2020 through to 2022? Well, what better way to demonstrate your members' capabilities as we start to put Canada on the global map as a place for electrification, not only the assembly of the vehicles, but I would say, as Paul was just alluding to, the tier 3 and the tier 2 supply chain as well. Global rankings show Canada in the top 4 for lithium-ion battery development as far as raw materials go. We are only behind the likes of China, Japan, and South Korea, but we're actually ahead of the US and the UK and Germany when it comes to those critical ingredients, I would say. This is a 4-stage project. We are in the critical stage, which is phase 2. We have challenged the Canadian academic institutions to come up with the design of the vehicle, which they have done, and it was a tremendous competition. But going forward, we are looking at implementing the latest I won't say traditions, I will say the latest trends for building an electric vehicle. Our RFP process is an algorithm AI-based portal where companies can go on and provide their details of what products and technology they want on the vehicle. Next slide, please. And I'm sure many of you watching and listening are interested in how can you be a part of Project Arrow? Well, as long as you have Canadian presence, just like Kartik and Dana and their team have already reached out to want to provide some of the parts and components on the vehicle. This is going to be a Canadian-built initiative, but we're not naive to say the tires are going to be somehow going to materialize without the likes of Goodyear or Michelin, who are both shown interest in wanting to put their products and technology on the vehicle. But as long as you have presence in Canada in the automotive sector and you are interested, we would implore you to go to the link shown, and I'm happy to provide more details after as well. Next slide, please. Again, technology partnerships. The vehicle today, ladies and gentlemen, has probably more in common with your cell phone than it does of a vehicle built in the 1990s. It's no longer a mechanical device. It is a technology platform. And with the electrification of our sector, General Motors announcing 2035, Canada and the US have both announced as nations to go zero carbon emissions by 2050. There is a move towards the adaptation of technology on the vehicle. Just over 5 years ago, the Tesla Model S had less than 10 ECUs on its vehicle. Today, you will see vehicles with over 100 ECUs, which are controlling and sending and making sure, information is transmitted and information is collected. We are changing, the sector's changing. I will also implore you to understand, for some reason, electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles are associated to one another. We do not think of autonomous technology and internal combustion vehicle technology. And so you will see a growth in autonomous vehicle technology. China announced just the past few days of their shuttle vehicle, which is a level 4 autonomous vehicle going into place in one of their provinces. And so Canada is a global leader. Two of the three godfathers of AI are Canadian. We have some globally recognized tier 1, tier 2 companies, the likes of Magna and Linamar or Woodbridge Group, to say but a few. We have the fastest growing tech sector. The Greater Toronto area alone, ladies and gentlemen, is generating more tech jobs than Silicon Valley, Washington, DC, and Seattle combined for the past 2 years. The one challenge we do face in Canada, and that's probably why they have a fellow with an English accent speaking on their behalf, is we aren't very good at promoting ourselves globally. But rest assured that for the Canada and the automotive sector as well. Next slide, please. The advancements in technology mean the vehicle, and especially a Canadian designed and developed vehicle, has to be more than just a technology platform. Project Arrow will be a vehicle that is providing care to those that are in that vehicle. The technology exists today. The technology is being developed by Canadian startups today. This vehicle will provide, not only, information that translates from, are you having a good day? Are you stressed? From visual, optical sensory technology, but biometric sensory data technology will also be implemented not only on this in its seats, but also through the instrument panel on its A, B, and C pillars. So do look for the vehicle as a caregiver, as a major offering. And again, why are we doing this? Because the vehicle no longer is about taking you from A to B. In fact, within the next 5 years, you won't be taking the vehicle from A to B, it will be taking you. We need to make sure that those who are, say, have disabilities or who are senior in age can continue to be taken from A to B safely, and we feel that there is an opportunity here to showcase. Next slide, please. For those of you who have not seen the vehicle, this is the final concept. A group of 4 industrial design students from Carleton University in Ottawa were the winners. I was proud to have Ralph Gills, a good friend of the APMAs, be the senior judge and describe this vehicle as something he would expect out of his studios from FCA. There is more to come over the next 18 months to 2 years, and we'll be happy to provide ACMA and the association with updates. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Perfect, Colin. Thank you very much. Very interesting and exciting to see how you use an industry transition to rebuild or build a local ecosystem. With that, I would like to call on Guru Prasad to give his views on the Indian market, the opportunities that India holds, and the way you should go about it.
I assume I'm audible. So yes. Bosch is one of the largest tier ones. Don't think too much of an introduction is required, but let me go ahead and do a quick bit. We are about 80 billion euros big in terms of turnover, over 400,000 associates, global presence, and about 60% of what we do is in mobility. The rest of it is in other areas. The focus at Bosch has always been engineering, and we have been a core engineering company with over 126 engineering locations globally. And we have also a very, very big engineering center back here in India. So it's a real pleasure for me to be part of this panel and share some insights. Thanks for having me here. Bosch has also been in India for close to 100 years. Next year will be 100th year. So it's really a long stay for us in India. We have, as I said, the largest engineering center or the development center outside of Germany in India, employing over 20,000 engineers, doing all sorts of work in the auto sector. We have one of the largest auto component manufacturing bases in India, manufacture virtually every kind of the automotive component that gets into vehicles in India. And of course, we do export quite a bit. In fact, my plant, which is the automotive electronics plant, has quite a lot of exports going out of India. So you can look at it as a good success story of a company which is supplying for the local market, but also doing a lot of exports. Okay, so some thoughts from my side. I think let me start with what's been working really well. I think engineering, as I said, is extremely well. It's a very large competent engineering team. Availability of talent is very, very good. The ability to collaborate with startups and the environment of working together with startups has been really very good for us so far. What's also improved quite a bit locally is the regulatory environment, which has now become really up to date, and with the BS6 norms coming in and in future electrification coming in, the regulatory environment is really up to date, and that helps bring in a lot of technology into India. And that's another great opportunity why we should look at partnering and working together. It's definitely the fourth largest auto market, growing very, very fast. So that's a great reason also to be doing stuff here. So we have a very large base, expanding our manufacturing base continuously. We do all sorts of stuff, electronics, mechanical. We get into multiple new areas, moving. As a real good strength is the supplier base, both local and the transplants of global companies. This has been quite well established in the meanwhile. Over the last 10 years, I think it's also developed extremely well and quite competent. There are hiccups once in a way, but we do have now a very, very good supply base and a base which is also adopting technology quite well. The electronics plant we have is one of India's most digitally ready plant. It just goes to show that Industry 4.0 manufacturing concepts of the leading plants world, India is home to such advanced technology. Of course, I would not leave out the topic of electrification, which is growing by leaps and bounds all over the world. So there, Bosch is investing lots of money, over 700 million euro year on year for the past several years. And this is a great opportunity, what we see in India for local engineering, frugal engineering, which can be applied to various segments which are pretty nascent, but on their way to higher adoption in India. We see early adoption happening in two-wheelers, three-wheelers, light commercial vehicles, maybe then buses, and finally passenger cars for sure. So these are all very good opportunities for us to keep pushing. Coupled closely with PLI, which the government starts to now focus a lot on localization. I think the production-linked incentives would make India a very good localization base, not just for the Indian market, which may be early in some cases, but also as a global supplier out of India. This should certainly help us move higher on the global competitiveness base. I do not think personally it's on a high base right now, but it's steadily increasing and moving up all the time. The hydrogen is another area, so fuel cell vehicles are surely on their way, especially in the commercial vehicle segments and buses. So this is also another opportunity for India to leapfrog, just like we did from BS4 to BS6. I think this is another opportunity for us to leapfrog into a new technology area and push for additional inroads into technology and cleaner technology in this area. So I would say overall, there are also some weaknesses in our global supply chain. I mean, in our supply chain compared to what, for example, is such a well-established one in China, as an example. Anywhere around a major hub in China, 200-kilometer radius, virtually you get everything you need. That's still not the case in India, and that's something that needs rapid improvements if we were to become a global base. What's also critical is that a lot of components, especially in electronics, still continue to be imported. And for example, in our electronics plant, 80% of everything we build, or close to 70% of everything we build, is imported. And the value add becomes that much lower. So this is a reason why, for example, today's semiconductor crisis starts to affect us heavily, and this is something to watch out as a country and how we progress in keeping tight reins on our overall value chain. As we move into electrification, I think it's going to be a similar story, especially with batteries and lithium-ion batteries. If the cell production doesn't happen locally and raw material sourcing is not reliable, that's another great cause for concern. So I'd wrap it up this way that we have some things to worry about, but a lot of opportunities to look forward to, and a great way forward over the next several years where the auto industry is set to grow very well. I'll take the rest during a Q&A. Back to you, Wilfred.
Perfect, Guru Prasad. Thanks a lot. So I think, first of all, thanks to everybody. I didn't have to do anything. Everybody kept their time, which is perfect. In terms of the topics that we've discussed, there's a large number of them, but I would like to sort of ask one question around I would call it the West-China tension, because yes, it's very visible, or was especially visible over the last 4 years, that there is a tension between the United States and China, but it's not limited to the US. The same kind of tension exists with Europe and China, albeit maybe not quite as visible. Definitely there was some tension between Canada and China as well. Just a question to the panel in terms of what does this really mean for India? Is this now the time where definitely not everybody's going to shut shop in China, but where significant investment will move from China? Is this an opportunity for India? And what do we have to do to make that happen? So who would like to take this call?
Current commodities, are you able to hear me? Okay,
yeah,
good. So looking at the current commodities, tariff definitely has barriers to entry in certain commodities to China. But we also, what we need to recognize is identifying those commodities that definitely China is not competitive on. I think that's the first step the suppliers in India need to take. And strategically, if you look at those commodities, whether it's raw materials, whether it's conversion costs, so on and so forth, there are certain factors. The tariffs totally put China out of the ballpark. I think if we can focus on those commodities, that's a quick win. Okay, that's the low-hanging fruit. But beyond that, I think it's the power electronics in all the electronic segments that China still has a big sway. Even if you put the tariffs on it, India is going to be still having a tough time to be competitive. So in order to get there, what are some key aspects that India needs to do to get there? I think it's a big issue is the raw material cost itself in some of those aspects, as well as the economies of scale. There needs to be a good thought process in how that needs to be accomplished. And secondly, the resiliency, right? The supply chain infrastructure. Although there's a lot of good work happening, how fast can it happen? And can it happen in a time that the global economics again changes? I think it's key that in the next 2 or 3 years, all these factors are considered and things put in place so that even if the markets open up later on with the tariffs going down, whichever way it goes, I think India would establish a good presence and footprint and also the capability in those segments. That's my perspective.
Yeah. I just to add on to what Kaushik said, Wilfred, I think the two words which I used are agility and flexibility. And the notion and the perception, I think these are the two areas, if I were to summarize, the notion and perception of the Indian supply base vis-a-vis the China supply base. And I think these are the two areas that we really need to introspect on. How can we be more agile, the time to market? And how can we be more flexible? Because oftentimes we get caught in these discussions of cost versus scale, and it becomes an ad nauseum discussion. And this is where I think China is able to gain strategic advantages. So if we can work on these, my request would be to everybody, including ourselves, including the OEMs, including the tier ones, including the tier twos, to introspect how do we cross those thresholds? What are our strategic interests, our strategic priorities, to look at it more strategically when we go through this journey. And I think we will find a solution if you're going to look at it from that perspective.
Or do we need also support from regulators? I mean, we talked about the fact that now we have global sort of BS6 regulation in the country, which obviously makes it a little bit easier to be on par to export, to potentially build scale, leverage scale. But do we really also need favorable policies that drive volumes in the domestic market to reach scale?
Policies will always be the add-on factor to get the scale. But fundamentally, we also need to be thinking in terms of the technologies that will help us to get the scale. So if we are going to be thinking in terms of new technologies that aid in terms of our manufacturing, because it's always going to be chicken or the egg, or who goes first, right? Is the government going to go first or the industry going to go first? And it's my personal opinion that we go first, right? And the government is there to support those. And we have to think more in terms of technical know-hows, in terms of manufacturing processes, design processes, to become more cost effective so that we can compete with China.
Perfect. Guru Prasad, how do you see this?
Yeah, I think like I said during my little introduction, China has an extremely good supplier base, well-connected value chain, which is centered around key hubs all over China. And within a 200-300 kilometer radius, virtually everything is possible. And that's not yet the case in India. I think that's number one that we need to do. The second thing for large-scale manufacturing, I think building of machines, the machines that make the products, I think that's also a very, very key requirement, which is missing currently in India, which we need a dramatic focus to be brought back in. The third one I would say is how well are we able to bring in engineering at scale, and how are we able to have local products designed which are globally competitive, and how can they be also produced at very competitive prices locally. I think these are three key things, because if you look around, China has been extremely innovative with all these things, and that's an area for us to look into deeply and get up to speed on that.
Exactly. I think the point in China also, we really have a consistent industrial policy that sort of build the basis for then others to build the scale, build up the capability in a quite a sort of structured manner. I think that's something that at least the Western countries are currently looking at and seeing if that is something to emulate as we move into electric vehicles and hydrogens and other points, right? Kaushik, you want to say something?
These days, at least with the COVID times, is suppliers' ability to ship parts on time, and having a stateside warehouse goes without saying becomes a requirement moving forward. Now, if you want to be competitive, you want to be a unique differentiator in gaining business, I think that makes a big difference, because when you talk about uptime in North America, that's key, keeping the customers back on the road. So sometimes you need parts in 24 hours. And if you want to ship it all the way from India, that's going to be totally out of question. So having a stateside warehouse, having a 60-day stateside inventory becomes the new norm. 30 days is like an old saying, but 60 days becomes a new norm. And having a stateside warehouse definitely puts suppliers as a unique differentiator moving forward.
Is necessary, reflects the risk in supply chains, but obviously also brings up cost in the overall process. Paul and Colin, I mean, we just had this discussion. One is the China discussion, sort of the big 800-pound gorilla. What does this mean for India? But you also pointed out in your discussions, there are other alternatives, right? I mean, the sourcing decision is a complex decision, not as straightforward as it used to be. What are some of the learnings that we could sort of take out of these sourcing decisions and that could help India position itself even better? I mean, we have significant exports in components, in vehicles, but what can we do to be even more perceived as a reliable and important partner for the global automotive industry?
Okay. Well, it's a very good question. And I think you hit on the key point. We need to think about this more of just China versus India. This is very much global competition. And anything that India seeks to do, it needs to be global best. Global best in quality, global best in scale, global best in technology, and global best in cost. And so it is a much broader competition. I think my colleague from Navistar raised a great point that in many ways, the real challenge, I think, in the current environment where people have seen a lot of supply chain disruption and risk is the competition with nearshoring as well. I mean, one of the trends we've seen, interestingly, is a lot of Chinese companies for the North American market investing in Mexico and having a local footprint to be able to balance, some of their China sourcing with some of that reactivity. So I think there's broad competition. But I think the answer is, and I think some of the folks have referred to this, is don't look at it in terms of big picture. The good news is that India is clearly on the table and can compete. So the question is then to look at the product category. Do we have an advantage here? And it is product category by product category. Do we have the right equation of infrastructure, freight cost, engineering, labor, and can we be a world leader in this category? And I think India is now in a position where it's not just saying, do we have some parts here or there, but pick the battles as a company and pick the areas where you can truly be a global and international leader. And I think that's what we're seeing and what people should aim for. Colin?
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. Colin, any feedback?
I would also say, yes, don't look at that 800-pound gorilla and think you're going to be able to take it on. Ignore it. China is heading on a trajectory which is going to, put a challenge on the likes of the United States and other jurisdictions to capture. It is about focusing on what India is good at. India is already recognized as being a technology leader. My conversations with India's DSCI, Cybersecurity Association, is really what their policies are and what they're planning to do over the next several years is globally potentially leading. And so we need to focus on what is going to be, best for India's capabilities. The one thing I would implore India to do is to look at sending its OEMs globally to assemble their products and vehicles, in places like North America or the NAFTA regions. China is kicking the tires, as they say. We do expect to see Chinese OEMs in North America over the next 5 years. I would heavily implore for the Indian OEMs to be looking at markets like North America, because where their OEMs go, their supply chain will go. And as their supply chains are recognized and appreciated, they're able to expand further. But I would really say there is a strong focus, or there should be a strong focus on technology, which includes electric vehicle technology, which I think India has a major role to play globally in.
I think that's a great point. I think that, the theme is strong OEs will create strong ecosystems. And obviously, if they are able to put up global footprints, good example is Bajaj, who's done quite a bit. I mean, more than 50% is export. It does apply base, and it's probably something that could be done even more, right? I think, in my work with various Indian companies, there's excellent capability, there's good engineering talent. The question is, how do I give companies an opportunity to scale up as far as technology is concerned, not only in automotive, say in engineering sectors as well, and then make that globally relevant? It's a very important point. The other point that you mentioned is this whole EV transition. Now, globally, what we see, and this may be a little bit simplified, but we do see the electrification transition, the hydrogen transition, being perceived as an opportunity to redefine the value chain of countries and redefine the position of countries in these value chains. I mean, you talked about Project Aero. We have legislation or industrialization or industrial policy framework in Germany that wants to drive green hydrogen technology. We have the same in China that will live off gray hydrogen and then basically first build scale and then later on invest in green technology. What is your expectation, recommendation? What should India do to make this happen also, or to be part of this transition? What are some of the areas that need to be tackled? And again, this is, at least in most geographies, a combination of industrial policy and companies. How does this come together for India? What is your recommendation? What are some of your thoughts?
Well, I think need to be attractive for those sectors to grow. The ingredients required for electrification of mobility, let's not even say passenger vehicles, let's talk about mobility. I would say need to make it attractive for supply chain to grow in order for those requirements to be met. If I can kind of, describe to you what's happening in the range of mobility, is we are seeing companies coming out of, for example, Volocopter from Germany, Dr. Wilfred. Volocopter developing one of the global first autonomous passenger drones, and they will be, using their technology for delivering, folks that are coming into Singapore that want to get down to the Bay of Singapore within the next 4 years. Who is building those drones? It is not aerospace. It is actually the automotive sector. And it's the same with a company called Bell and Hyundai. So there is this expansion of what the product offering is that is about mobility. And so this is a new trend. Automotive sector used to just make only automotive parts and automotive components. It's now expanding, and I think India should look at that expansion and make sure and ask questions of its OEs to say, how are you playing a role in all mobility, whether it's in the sky or whether it's on the ground, or as some companies like Hyperloop and now the Boring Company from Tesla, below the ground. People need to get from A to B. The whole palette has changed. It's now opened up. And so India has an opportunity to jump in, just like they did with cell phones and landline phones. I remember going to India as a young boy and having to go to the local town to make those calls, at the STP or whatever it used to be called. And then now I go home and people have 2 cell phones. It's quite common to have 2 cell phones in India. So as they were able to leapfrog that industry and that sector, I would say India has an opportunity here because of its technology base to be able to be a provider of all types of mobility. And that is something and policies and regulations need to support.
I think it's a good point. Goes back to your discussion around cybersecurity. I have ecosystems such as Bangalore, and one of my selling points for the R&D center in Bangalore was to say, okay, listen, I have an ecosystem that doesn't exist in Stuttgart, right? I have all the relevant companies over there. I have a good integration of the universities with the various tech companies, and that creates capability that needs to be leveraged. And I think in India's case, as you said, how can I figure out sort of a cross-industry solution that integrates my core capability in automotive with the core capabilities that I have around software, algorithms, cybersecurity, and similar topics. Praveen, how do you see this ecosystem developing, the EV ecosystem developing? What is needed from your perspective?
Yeah, from the e-mobility side of it, from a Meritor perspective, we have several products that have been already launched for the commercial vehicles, and through our footprint in India, some of these products are really flowing down here, and like Ilan talked about, just the time. Maybe the commercial vehicles is just flowing faster, but I would say the ecosystem needs definitely here in terms of its ability to manage, handle the recharging and that. But overall, I would say that it's definitely improving, and mobile phones are definitely a greater example here. And it is just it's going to be no option but to embrace.
how to say, the other point over here, we've talked about mobile phones. We have other areas where India is leading. If we look at, for example, financial services, right? Mobile banking is definitely something that's way ahead of what we see generally in the West. One point that was mentioned again, and I'll turn that over first to Karthik, is this point. Dana is a good example of partnerships, of working together, of changing the position within the value chain of a company by figuring out what it is that you want to do, and then finding the building blocks that allow you to build this new capability, this new value proposition for customers. Now, the history with joint ventures in India, or generally with joint ventures, is always a little bit difficult. There's a sort of 50% that work and 50% that don't work. What is your recommendation if you look at a situation where clearly Indian suppliers need a stronger international presence, they need a presence in the United States? We talked about COVID and we talked about inventory. We talked also about USMCA. What is your recommendation? How do you make this work? What is sort of the secret sauce behind the partnership approaches and joint venture approaches that you have at Dana?
Dana has a very successful joint venture partnership in India with the Anand Group, and it's been there for several decades now. And it has been one of mutual trust. Like you rightly said, most partnerships would not work. And also in the case of Dana, in the case of other partnerships. But in the case of Anand Group, they bring value to the table in terms of understanding of the market, in terms of the ability to scale up in very short periods of time, the ability to adopt the best practices within Dana and also across the rest of the joint ventures, right, has really brought so much of value to the table and has been a reason for success. And I think this is where, when companies try to make partnerships, investments, it's very important to understand the other person, have the trust, and remember, be persistent and consistent. Most partnerships don't work because you enter into your marriage and thinking something, and then you end up in a divorce 2 years down the line. So you got to be truthful, you got to be persistent and consistent. And if that happens, I think that is a key thing to driving partnerships. Be it joint ventures, be it any other minority stakes, that is very, very critical. Persistence and consistency of how you are towards your partner. And to the other point, Dr. Wilfred, I think India does have the benefit of a big two-wheeler market, right? And we should deploy that to the advantage in terms of scale, right? Because the two-wheeler, and whether you talk about the motors, the inverters, or the control systems that go into motor vehicles, this is the absolute apt industry. The two-wheelers, the three-wheelers, and also the the Tata Aces and so on and so forth are absolutely apt. And these are the high volume runners, and this will help us get scale into the automotive industry. So I think there's a huge potential in terms of EV in general for India, so long as we capitalize it the right way.
And I think there may be, again, one is obviously the India market, scale generation within the India market, and then as the mobility environment changes in other geographies, to really watch that carefully and see why not export into for example, the West for urban mobility application. Or if I look at, Piaggio has applications in Italy running already in the cities for cleaning the roads. These are applications that, in my opinion, are easy wins for capable Indian suppliers and OEs in my opinion.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of opportunity once you work off the strength of a lead market. One of the points that was also mentioned is this whole question around investments. And I remember when I sort of first started out in India a few years ago, one of the comments was always that basically most suppliers would wait for the volume to come and invest, right? So you would run your factory at a very high capacity utilization, and then only if you see that you had to invest and expand, you did. Counter example is Mothers and Sumi. Chand basically went always ahead of demand, was able to build a $20 billion business based on this. What is your take? How is the environment today? Are we seeing more engagement from the supply base? Is this only with the large players? Are the smaller players also understanding that they need to invest, or is this still a big area of concern?
I think this is a great question again, and it's the million-dollar question. And honestly, as I give this answer, I'm probably in discussions with many of the esteemed suppliers here in this discussion as well on exactly this thing. Is there's always going to be a gestation period, and I have seen two types, Wilfred, just to say. Some of them are highly evolved in terms of understanding the market and very conscious in terms of the strategy that they would like themselves to have. So I've seen, two categories, while dealing with, let's say, suppliers, both small and even large. It's more of your own priorities and strategies. Some of them are very conscious that they would like to play in the EV field, have a very robust strategy to have a diversification into this, which I spoke about, in terms of disruption. And these suppliers definitely are capable and understand how to, get to the sweet spot in terms of costs prior to going into full-blown production. And yet I have, a category of partners or suppliers that we deal with who struggle on that front because the daily mindset, like you rightly said, is in terms of scale. So if you scale, like it, but we got to make our choices and understand where we want to invest in and what technologies, that help us give this competitive edge during the gestation period. So I've had experiences at both ends, and I would strongly urge suppliers to think that way, that if you want to have exposure to the electrification industry, you need to start thinking how you're competitive before the scale or not. This is going to have a ripple effect across the industry.
No, absolutely. And Guru Prasad, you were mentioning investments also in IoT, Industry 4.0. Bosch has been active in India, has done a lot in terms of bringing this technology into the factories, into the Bosch factories, and even has some engineering service set up to help people transition into these technologies. What is your take? Is this really something that's being pursued as a way to drive efficiency, as a way to drive quality and hedge against labor issues? Or is this an area where we still need quite a bit of investment and focus?
I would say we still need a lot of investment and focus. It's currently driven more in terms of bringing in efficiencies, productivity. How do we gain repetitive products? How do we improve quality? How do we collect a lot of data for analytics and so on? So these are the primary objectives with which we are driving it today, not so much with regard to reduction of labor or whatever. I think that's not the primary focus yet. But I would say some companies are pretty advanced in how they've digitized their plants. It also depends a lot on how the manufacturing machinery is connected through sensors and systems back into the IT backbone, but it's still a long way to go.
No, perfect. Thank you. I think with that, we are at our allotted time limit. This was a very insightful discussion. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for your feedback, for your insights. Really appreciate the time that you've taken and the wisdom that you've shared with us. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Lakshmi.
Today's program by offering a vote of thanks. First, like to very much thank Dr. Olper for moderating an interesting, insightful panel discussion. I'd like to thank each of our distinguished panelists for taking the time to join us today. Mr. Kaushik Bhupendra, Mr. K.V. Praveen, Mr. Karthik Selvan, Mr. Paul McCarthy, Mr. Colin Dhillon, and Mr. Guru Prasad Mudlapur. For today's event, I'd like to express our gratitude in particular to MEMA and to APMA, the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association of Canada, for their partnership with us. And last but not the least, I would like to thank the ACMA Secretariat for their support in organizing this event. Thank you all very much for joining us.